This model in 2012, having dispersed over the world with a circulation of more than 1 million copies, became the car of the year. She managed to move such authorities as Focus and Passat in the markets. And today we have to figure out how justified the ambitions of the 5th generation Elantra turned out to be, with the factory index MD. The Korean market first saw this car in the fall of 2010 under the name of Elantra. Things at Hyundai went uphill noticeably, as soon as the Koreans, giving way to the Europeans, prudently resigned from the responsibility for developing the design of all their global models. The 5th generation car came out, without exaggeration, pretty, despite the fact that technically it largely repeated its predecessor. However, the car of the year laurels did the car a disservice. In any case, in the markets of those countries where the quality of roads is far behind the high European level. After collecting the first, and subsequent, reviews in the car, they decided not to change anything, relying on its original quality resource. And some things needed to change. Take at least the suspension settings, suitable only for movement on ideal roads. In Ukraine, the front-wheel drive sedan was equipped with atmospheric gasoline 4s, a 1.6-liter 130 horsepower Chinese-made Gamma series engine and a more powerful 1.8-liter 150 horsepower new series engine. Over the past time, in addition to the main negative points associated with poor maintainability and a relatively small total resource, the motors, oddly enough, have not received any negative. They honestly take care of their prescribed 200 to 250,000 km, then demanding cardinal key and by no means cheap replacements. Among the transmissions was a couple of 6-speed gearboxes, mechanics and automatic. In the first case, the life of the owner of a used car will be calmer. Problems can be avoided for the life of an Elantra with a manual gearbox by only occasionally changing the gearbox oil. With an automatic, the story is more complicated. Machine guns, of course, far from all, were caught on ailments already on runs of 30,000 km. Malfunctions were expressed in noticeable shocks when switching or when braking. Such an ailment was usually treated by flashing the ECU of the box. It helped. As for the oil in the transmission, it is recommended to replace it at least once every 60,000 km, but the Elantra was not particularly lucky with the suspension. Existing exclusively in a city with good roads, you will not feel the catch. However, when buying such a car, you need to understand that initially it is poorly adapted to driving at high, more than 90 km/h, speeds along our broken roads. At the front, the suspension travels are very short, breakdowns are not uncommon. With all the ensuing consequences for the bearing parts and wheel bearings. Tires should be chosen with a higher profile so that the discs do not compost them in every pit missed by inattention. In addition, the car sways willingly, and the rear axle, where, by the way, the suspension is the same as that of the Accent, now and then rearranges on potholes with a change in trajectory. In order not to take risks and eliminate suspension flaws, many owners install stiffer springs and shock absorbers, choosing suitable analogs from other cars. And this practice has partly justified itself. On the body you can find radically opposite opinions. Some note only small chips on the hood and a decent quality of the paintwork. For others, the quality of galvanizing, the thickness of paint, body iron and even glass do not cause any, except negative, emotions. Objectively, there are not rare cases of damage to the paintwork on the trunk lid and rear fenders and the places of their contact with the lights. In the cabin, problems can also be avoided. I don't even want to talk about plastic creaking on an unheated car. Literally for 20 to 30,000 km, the steering wheel peels off. Seat upholstery, especially leather, is not able to resist wear. And the driver's elbow on the left door can even push through a hole of fair size. But these troubles can be cut off when choosing a used car. Speaking of electrics, we have to admit that here at Hyundai they generally did a good job. Failures are not common, and it is not even possible to single out the most characteristic among them. Well, except that the contacts on the brake light switch under the brake pedal often rot. Troubleshooting is simple and not expensive at all. Sometimes there are problems associated with starting the engine with a button. In fact, the price of the car on the secondary and the margin of its durability for some time make it a good option to buy. The main thing is to make sure that the actual mileage is clean and that the engine and transmission are in an acceptable condition. And then, who knows, maybe the Elantra will serve you for several more years. However, we strongly do not recommend considering this machine as a reliable way to invest. Burnout. Front wheel bearings are often asked to be replaced after 20 to 30,000 km. Their enemy is pits. From impacts, play also occurs at the junction of the long part of the steering shaft with its short component. In addition, wear on the right steering rack bushing is not uncommon. The cost of solving the problem is about 8,000 Ukrainian hryvnia. With work, the cost of repairing a failed machine gun cannot be called predatory. But it cannot be avoided. For example, cars assembled before mid-April 2011 quickly began to click after the gear selector was moved to position D due to play in the CV joint. Dealers fix the problem by installing special washers. Elantra motors are far from the standard of efficiency, which partly compensates for the ability to consume AI-92. But their main drawback is a resource limited by poor maintainability. To extend it, mechanics recommend changing the oil every 10,000 km, trying not to deviate from the manufacturer's instructions. The car is made, to put it mildly, economically. Damage to body parts necessarily entails their replacement. Even the fender liner is made of brittle plastic no more than 2 mm thick. Can crack if the mudguard contacts the curb. Bumpers walk. They are recommended to be put on self-tapping screws. On runs of more than 50,000 km, there have been cases of wedging of the brakes due to the destruction of the hose between the master brake cylinder and the ABS unit. The hose is not very expensive, 800 US 900. On the forums, some complain about tinkling in the area of /U200B/U200 front brake calipers. Moreover, this misfortune does not depend on the mileage.